And we're back for part two with Mr. Ron Branstner, amazing American patriot, and a man who knows too much, right? North by Northwest. Here we are in Minnesota during the height of the Tim Walz, Hair Walz lockdown, Frau Norton, and the whole deal. Here we are, they're resetting our economy. COVID-19 is the perfect opportunity to reset the economy, says Davos, the World Economic Summit in June. And when we left off, we were talking a little bit about these new nameless, faceless bureaucrats who are more powerful than our elected officials, than our political parties, more powerful because it's similar to the decline of the EU, the European Economic Community, in terms of nobody knew who was assigned to the bureaucracy. They had special shopping networks set up. It's the reason for Brexit in Britain. It's the reason for the Italians wanting to exit, the rise of Marine Le Pen, who wishes to take France. It seems that even Francois, the current prime minister of France, the diminutive guy who married his high school drama teacher. I can't remember his name right now. He's a pretty boy. It'll come up later. But what's going on in Minnesota? We seem to have the same sort of nameless, faceless bureaucrats who've been assigned to govern every aspect of our lives from the cradle to career, from morning to night. They know all. They tell only some.
Yeah. Oh, poetry. I love it. Well, again, Wes, as I say, you hit on about 15 different notes there, and we left off with the educational note. You were talking about Tim Walz and the different unelected bureaucrats out there. Well, let's just start with Tim Walz, and then we'll go off from there because there's so much here in her open introduction that it would take hours to fill it. But let's start. It would literally.
Trying to prime your pump. I pour a little water in to try to get it going, Ron, because
Yeah,
it's all.
yeah. So here, let's just start off with the man behind the curtain, Tim Walz. Tim Walz basically just follows the skirt of Dayton, Mark Dayton. When okay, let's take a step back in time to 1993 when Republican Arnie Carlson was governor, and you look at his transition team. He had a transition team of 30. Okay, and that 30 people, if you pull up the website, which is on my PowerPoint, you're going to notice that almost everybody on his transition team had something to do with sustainability, because it says it's sustainability on each one of those 30 that were on his, and he called it the round table. You ever heard of that? The
Yeah.
Governor Arnie Carlson round table. Now,
Yeah.
let's fast forward it to 2018. We got Tim Walz, magical Tim Walz, who was the governor of District 1 in Minnesota, barely could survive, was about to lose his congressman position. He was about to be voted out. The rest of the state had no idea who this monkey was. And he basically rode on the skirt tails of the Hormel Foundation, the Rochester Mayo Foundation, and he worked off of these foundations. And he was basically the puppet master. He did what they asked him to do. And the Blandon Foundation was another one of those, which is out of Grand Rapids. Now, the first two I mentioned was the Hormel Foundation, the Rochester Mayo, is that they're out of the District 1 where he was located. He had a transition team in 2018 of 29. Now, Arnie Carlson had a transition team of 30. And if you look at the transition team of Tim Walz's, it basically mimics the sustainability movement of 1993 of Arnie Carlson. Again, same deal. In fact, there was a gentleman, if you want to call him that, Paul Olson, the ex-CEO of the Blandon Foundation. He went public and stated that that finally, since 1993, the Blandon Foundation is going to fulfill its wishes and dreams that they have been trying to do since 1993. So here you got a guy at Blanding Foundation saying, "Yes, we're finally going to do. We're going to go. We're going to get those sustainability movements, and we're going to get that that social equity program." And so, what does Tim Walz do? He puts on his transition team the Blanding Foundation as one of his transition teams. The other
Wow.
one he puts on there is Hormel as his transition team, and then he also puts SEIU 26, total insider movement to illegal immigration of 5,000 employees. And then, most prominently known in Minnesota, he puts on CARE, Council Affairs of Islamic Relations, basically a terrorist organization. They're unindicted co-conspirators of the Holy Land Trial Foundation.
Right.
Here you are. You just shared this with me, and I don't want to get too far off track. We're talking about the transition team. Why would you have a
All
terrorist
connected.
organization? A terrorist organization on a transition team on the governor's transition team in Minnesota. You have a terrorist organization. So here we are. We've got the Hormel Foundation, the Blanded Foundation. We got SEIU, and we've got none other than CARE. So when you
Well,
look at
through
now, that was a
through
little bit
CARE,
different.
the Muslim Brotherhood, because the CARE was, I mean, to be fair, CARE was an unindicted co-conspirator, right? But
That's
but CARE is still for it was formed by members who were rejected by or thrown out, well, had been involved with the Muslim Brotherhood, which
well,
is a terrorist organization, even in the country of its origin, Egypt. Yeah.
um, close, but you're on track. Okay,
Okay.
I
Okay.
want you to think of the again. We're getting a little bit off track here, but if you want to find out who CARE is, I
Yeah.
can feel that. CARE, there were six different individuals. They came from all parts of the country, Oklahoma, Texas, and they
Mm-hmm.
were all from Saudi Arabia, Iraq. They were from different countries, and they all
Mm-hmm.
went to major universities in Minnesota, in the United States. And these, which is unusual about these six individuals, is how do they know each other? They were from different countries. They were
Mm-hmm.
from different states. They were from different universities, and they all end up they end up in Culver City, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. They all end up there, and they create this foundation called the Holy Land Foundation. And
Mm-hmm.
how did they all meet up? And then out of that, then comes CARE, and then CARE was an unindicted co-conspirator in this, as one
Mm-hmm.
of the 29 unindicted co-conspirators. So, yes, I wanted to give you a little bit backdrop of who CARE was. Now,
Yeah.
with that said, here we're going back to Tim Walz. Tim Walz has 29 on his transition team. He has one mayor, which is out of Fergus Falls, which is really unusual. He's a far left liberal. He's pushing Agenda 21, the socialist programs heavily up there. The Blanding Foundation, which is out of Grand Rapids, um, and they got some Indian
Jelani
tribes.
Hussein, right?
Who?
Jelani Hussein
Well,
of the
Jihadi is part of CARE.
right. Okay.
You bump up with CARE. You've got I think it's Crawford out of some radical leftists out of Duluth. So you look at the makeup of his; it's a little bit different makeup than Artie Carlson. Artie Carlson had more of like industry and very high-powered people. He has a lot of money makers. Waltz
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
He has to scratch in their backs because that's how he got in office. That's almost what it looks like.
Right.
So he's
Yeah.
doing a lot of payback. He's doing a lot
Yeah.
of payback to these left wing liberals, which got him elected into the office. These far left liberals that are on here are followers of the Agenda 21, the sustainability movement. They
Mm-hmm.
follow it to the letter, and that kind of gives you an idea. Now, if you wanted to stay on Tim Walz, we could do it just hours of presentations on Tim Walz because this is one of the guys that I know he's a
Well,
strange cat.
but let's tie it. I mean, we could do that, and there's all kinds of fodder. We have to talk about Jelani Hussein at some point. We have to talk about Attorney General Keith Ellison at some
Oh,
point. And do a whole
one of my
program on his
favorite old
biography,
buddies.
and radical, connections to Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. I mean, Minnesota is just ripe for this kind of takeover. But can you tie it back to what we were talking about in the first segment about the regional economic development corporations and energy independence, and tying Minnesota back into the Paris Climate Accords?
Yes.
Because Minnesota was one of the states that refused to leave the Paris Climate Accords, even though our president of our country said we're walking away from it. And it's been very good. That decision has resulted in savings for America and energy independence for America. China hasn't stopped building coal-fired power plants in their own nation and on the continent of Africa. The Chinese are taking over massive swathes of other countries. They bought an entire port city in Pakistan. But can we try to link it with part one a little bit in terms of the
All right.
Paris?
Try to draw you a picture first. So
Yeah.
first, we have 178 heads of state in 1993 that voted for the Agenda 21 sustainability movement, and I think they've added a few on to that since then. During that process, they started what they call regional government. So first, you started off with the European Union, which is of several states, several unions got together. Then we started off with the North American Union, which was Mexico, Canada, the United States, right? TTP. And so what you're doing is you're seeing all these regional governments being created all throughout the world. Then
Mm-hmm.
within inside the United States, we have regional governments. We have four regions. And then within inside those regions, there are four regions in the United States. Within inside those regions, inside states, you have multiple regions. Minnesota has up to 9 to 11 just in Minnesota alone. Now, so what we're
Wow.
talking about is regional government. And as soon as they can just do three down to now it's one, and then we have the European Union, the United States Union. We have all these different. So then they start to combine them. In time, they'll start to combine all the unions together. In Minnesota, we have these unions, and they're separate now. They're called co-ops, and these co-ops are basically regional governments that are set outside of the United States Constitution. So they are unelected bureaucrats, unelected officials who sit on boards, and these bureaucrats, if you want to call them,
Right.
they then start doing sustainability movements within inside these. They sometimes they'll have 5 to 10 counties. If you take Region 5, I think they have. I can't remember how many counties. If it's 5 to 7 counties, and with
Mm-hmm.
inside there, they control all that region. So you have your mayors, your city council. Your city council, the mayor creates what they call uh, commissions. And
Mm-hmm.
these commissions work separately from the city council. So now you got now there's your first entity
Right.
of non-representative government.
Yeah.
Because under, I think it was the 1968 Act, that says that the mayor could create these boards, these commission boards, because it takes these citizen review boards and it takes the pressure off the city council. And
Oh,
then what
cool.
they do is they review and then they send back to the city council, and the city council can rubber stamp what they did. The city council does no work, yet they get credit for it, and yet it's a citizen review board. Now, that's one citizens review board.
Mm-hmm.
uh, St. Cloud has 23 citizen review boards. You have park review boards, you have airport review boards, it just goes on and on. Wilmer has 22. Some cities only have four, some have none. But once you get these non-elected people off to the side, working for or doing all the work for the elected people, and they have to answer to these commissions, and then the city council then votes on it. Well, once they get these commissions made, well, then the mayor and the mayors in these regional governments are asked to serve on boards at the regional government, which is in 5 to 7 counties. Once they don't have to sit on them, but they can go and be appointed to these positions, but they're not elected to be on these regional governments.
Oh
These regional
boy.
governments then work and they apply for grants. They work for the sustainability movement. They create initiatives or ask for initiatives to be made. And then they go to the county commissioners and they work for the county commissioners. And the county commissioners is kind of like the city council. They just rubber stamp it because they did all the work for them. So you have the commit. You have these appointed positions, which are city boards who do the work for the council members, right? And then you
Right.
have these regional members who do all the work for the county commissioners. So here you got all these guys who are getting paid to do nothing because somebody else does the work for them. While these people in the background, they're working under the sustainability movement because they're under a fourth branch of government. They're not elected people. And we're all listening to them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does this make sense to you?
Yes, it's a diffusion of responsibility so that you can endlessly pass the buck. You can always have someone else to say, well, that person made this decision, or these NGOs, or these nonprofits, or these experts. They were appointed experts, or they represent a community, right? And we
Right.
need to be compassionate toward that community. So they roll out these initiatives. There's no public debate on it. It's just determined to be something that we need to do. And I think this gets a toehold in Minnesota because we are such kind hearted people, but we are a little bit soft in the head in terms of applying Robert's Rules of Order and applying uh, governmental responsibility. uh, Politicians love to have somebody else to say, "Oh, that wasn't my decision, but there was an expert panel, or there was a study." Right? Thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars paid for a study by a panel of experts, by some lab coats at
Sure.
MIT or Columbia or some other liberal Seven Sisters University. That's going to then tell the people of Minnesota what we need to think and feel and accept as okay. And these nonprofits are awfully profitable, aren't they?
Well, they're extremely profitable. So as long as they keep asking for the grant money and they keep writing these comprehensive plans for your community, they help write the comprehensive. I'll give an example. Sourcewell. In the last segment I mentioned Sourcewell out of
Yeah.
Staples, Minnesota. Sourcewell actually writes grants for cities now. Now, if you ask Sourcewell what they do, they say they are a buying power, the National Joint Powers Association turned into Sourcewell. They're a buying power for cities and schools, so they can get better buying power through the federal government because they're a government agency, and they can reduce your costs for, let's say, a fire truck or an ambulance car or something for your school desk or whatever. They're a buying power. That's what they'll tell you that they're for. But in fact, they do multiple different things. They write grants for your city. They're into the. They got permission to work with the Department of Education. They sit in your classrooms. They watch what you teach. Um, they're just multiple entities, and yet nobody knows who these people are.
No, no. You say, Ron, is the Council of Europe one of those entities too? Because I have asked Mayor Norton of Rochester, Minnesota, numerous times, who are these supervisors from the Council of Europe? Who's paying for them to supervise our elected officials, our government employees? Who are they? When do we have an opportunity to ask them some questions about where they're from? And I just don't understand why we feel that the Europeans have anything at all to teach us about equity, all these fine words and concepts, socialism, communism, all of the other gifts of Europe that America was founded to reject kings and queens and potentates and bureaucrats and unelected officials. The United States of America is a sovereign nation, and we have supervisors from the Council of Europe here interviewing our government officials for their levels of implicit bias or white privilege. And it's insane that Why would you bring Europeans after everything we've been told about Europe and Europeans? Why would we bring colonizers from Europe to supervise our government in the United States of America? These faceless, nameless bureaucrats. Did they
Again,
vote in the last election? I don't. Maybe they voted for Biden. I don't know.
well, I think I mentioned to you offline here that the Council of Europe is only in one city in the United States. The United States has banned the Council of Europe to even come here. They don't work that. In fact, it's against the Constitution to allow a foreign entity or a foreign law into the United States. So basically, what Rochester is doing is they're actually in violation of a statute under the Constitution that they're working with a foreign entity outside the scope of the Constitution. Because remember, I don't know if you know this, the Council of Europe deals with the 1948 treaty, which is the Human Rights Treaty of 1948, of the United Nations Human Rights Treaty. Well, the United States does not recognize the United States Human Rights Commission
United
as
Nations
a,
Human Rights
as a
Commission.
whole. Yeah, United States. No, the United States does not recognize the United Nations Human Rights Commission as a whole. They have not certified it because we have our own constitution. Now, a lot of that is pretty similar. Our constitutions are pretty similar, but the United Nations goes farther. They go more into individual rights than we go off of rights as equality under the 14th Amendment. Everybody's equal under the law. Well, they go a little bit more into the rabbit hole. They go into sexuality and transgender and a whole bunch of other stuff, and they kind of go off into the rabbit hole where we try to stay within the guidelines of very simplistic. Everybody's equal under the law.
Everybody's equal. We can agree to that. Yeah.
Right. So why would
But we don't have to be compelled to use your pronouns or your correct speech or your correct thought. I mean, American free speech rights would say that we have a right to question all religions, not just Christianity. Christianity is reviled, Christmas is desecrated. There's a lot of statements that people make against Christianity constantly, and there's, of course, zero consequences. But the blasphemy laws of the United Nations Human Rights Commission dictate that you may not criticize Islam or ask a question of Islamists because that is a violation of human rights because Islam is taken as a unified individual with human rights.
okay.
But I
Well,
diverted. Sorry.
yeah, we went off track there a little bit. So if you're going to stay
Yep.
on track, basically that comes under a whole different guidelines of the Palestinians voting 147 they overwhelmingly voted for the blasphemy laws in 2007, which gave them the individual of Islam the rights as a culture. They're the only ones under the religious persecution that if you say anything towards religion, it is a violation. Now, again, the Germans, the Europeans fought against that, and most countries don't acknowledge that. But that was done again under a whole different guidelines in 2007.
Mm.
Uh, but that's another subject. But
That's a whole other program,
yeah,
Ron.
so I mean, we could get into the
I was
Islamic
just
thing.
trying to look smart there.
Of course, that's one of my favorite things to talk about. And
I know.
I would love to talk about hours about dismantling Islam, but and that's
Well,
fun to
a
do.
whole
I got to
other.
tell you, I have a blast doing it. But the fact that we're getting back to the regional government, regional governments are here. You are fully on board in Rochester. Your mayor is fully on board with the sustainability movement. Once they went to the European movement, Europe Council of Europe, they actually got on to the Paris Climate Agreement, and they're following a whole different set of rules. Because if you follow the the Council of Europe, you're following the 1948 Human Rights Commission. There's
Mm.
a problem there, and then the Council of Europe also recognizes Islam. But there's a problem with there because Islam recognizes the Human Rights Commission of 1992 under the Cairo Agreement, which gives Islam a totally different free reign of religious rights. So now you got the 1948 Human Rights Commission, you got the 1992 Cairo, and then you've got these two fighting it out, and then you've got the United States Constitution. You're going, wait a second, who are we? Who are we as United States people? Which one do we follow? Of course, we follow the Constitution. So why is it that a Mayor Beatty, I think his name was, why
Yeah,
did
Brady.
he sign
Brady.
on to the Council of Europe when the Council of Europe doesn't even recognize certain facets of Islam? So here you are, if we're all going to be uh, uh, all on board with personal rights of religious freedoms, well, the Council of Europe doesn't even agree with Islam and the way they treat women. So how is it that in a city like
Yeah.
Rochester you got so many Islamic people, and then you bring in the Council of Europe that doesn't even recognize their religion under their guidelines? So how does that work?
Well, both Mayor Brady and Mayor Norton have been asked to explain the Council of Europe's presence in Rochester. Brady was asked in public meetings, what does this mean and why did you do this? And he didn't seem to understand what he had done. It may have been some initiative that was set in front of him, and he thought he was signing something that created a sister city relationship or a sister country relationship or continent. He didn't have a good answer. Mayor Norton has never replied in public to. Actually, she made a post on the Council of Europe on her Facebook page, and she said that due to COVID-19, the group hadn't been active, but they look forward to hosting them in the future. To which and others replied, when will we be able to meet these people? When will we be able to ask them questions? I actually would love to go to a city council meeting and speak to them in any number of European languages to ask them what is the Council of Europe and why they think they have something to teach us in a sovereign nation, the United States of America, anything about human rights whatsoever,
Right.
considering people of Europe are suffering right now.
Yet when they don't even accept the human rights of Islam and their personal religion, which I don't either. I mean, when you say that you can beat your wife in Surah 2:23,
Right.
of course we're not going to accept that. They don't accept it either, nor does the Constitution accept it. But yet it's two partnered up together. The European Union partnered up with Islam. So it gets very confusing when you have that outside the scope of the Constitution, and you really got to look at it. The Constitution says that them acknowledging and bringing over a foreign entity into Rochester is in violation. It is in violation. You cannot bring in a foreign entity into this land.
It's bizarre. And to think that Rochester would think they could do something like that and that the people of Rochester would allow it to happen, it's a mystery. It really needs to be addressed in public session. And there needs to be, aren't there two planks in the Constitution of the United States that teach, I mean, that inform us that we must not have a person in the United States with a treaty relationship without, outside the United States. Foreign entities aren't allowed to make contracts, or not contracts,
No,
but
you're right. You're right. It's a treaty though. We're not allowed.
treaties.
For,
Yeah,
no, you're right. There is a section in there on that. Yes.
yeah. Well, Ron, would you want to sum up in a minute like what we've been talking about for the last 30 as a way of closure? Uh, and would you say something about Christmas in terms, I know that's really off topic, but can you mention a Christmas tradition that's special to you, something that uh, is a tradition that in this day and age of cancel culture where we've had every one of our American holidays, both civic and religious, canceled ever since the week before Easter. This year, Easter canceled, 4th of July canceled. You mustn't celebrate Thanksgiving. You mustn't celebrate Christmas. Don't get together with your family. Stay home. Don't go to church. Everything's canceled this year. Does this have something to do with what we're talking about tonight? This
Uh,
lockdown?
yeah, well, let's first of all, Merry Christmas, by the way.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Uh, um, there's Merry Christmas. The history behind Christmas goes back hundreds of years. And when it came to the United States, it basically is a tradition made up of multi different cultures that have brought their piece of the pie to the Christmas tradition. You take, for example, the mistletoe, I believe, was brought in from Germany. The tree was brought in from Germany. If you bring in the poinsettia, you know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you the red flower, the
Yeah, the
beautiful
red
red
flower
flower
with
poinsettia?
the red beans and the green
Yeah, red
leaves. Yeah.
poinsettia. That was brought into the United States by William Poinsettia. There was the ambassador to Mexico to the United States. That was a gift to the United States from Mexico, and that was introduced into the American culture of Christianity into Christmas. So you got the mistletoe brought in from one country, you've got the tree brought in from Germany, and all of these different entities that were brought in from all these different countries to make up an extremely beautiful, traditional, inclusive culture. And then on top of that, you get these I don't know. I guess I don't want to call them. They're just unless you got the nutcrackers, we'll call them a nutcracker. You know, they're out there trying to destroy Christmas when in fact they're destroying their own culture for bringing in and making themselves into inclusive under one umbrella. So
We
here,
have diversity, don't we? I mean, it's truly diverse. We have multiculturalism in terms of the way that the Irish celebrated Christmas, or the English, or the French, or the Germans, or the Italians. Multiculturalism is not something that needs to be brought to us. America is a crazy quilt of many cultures, and we are a diverse people as we are. We don't need to be enriched by people who claim to be bringing us something better.
well, you know, and then look at it from the charitable side. I mean, 85% of charity doesn't come. Not most of it does not come from government. It comes from individuality. And
Mhm.
Christmas is a time of charity. And Christmas is a time of giving. And we take care of our poor. We take care of our hunger. We take care of our huddled masses, right? Just like
Right.
Lazarus said on the Statue of Liberty, which is a poem. There's no law about it. It was a poem. But the point is Christmas is a time to give to those who are in need and to give those to who you love. And so we embrace all the different cultures and bring them all together. And we also include the multi different religions. The Jewish religion is included because Christianity is based off the Torah. Then you have Christianity and all the other religions. So you bring in the Jewish population, and then you have the books of the false teachings of Islam. They're brought into it too because they teach a little bit about supposedly Jesus by the name of Issa. Another story I'd love to get into. But the point is that we're all the Christianity and Christmas is inclusive to everybody, and everybody is included. You know, in 1932, when an artist drew a picture on a Coke bottle
Right.
of Santa Claus, you know,
Yes.
he drew that as a guy with a heavy set guy with rosy cheeks and whatever. Um,
Right.
St. Nicholas comes out of 329 AD, and it was basically a very tall, thin man, and he was giving charity to kids, and he was a bishop, and he gave charity. So the real history behind that man was a very charitable man, very tall, very thin. It was a cartoonist in 1932 that actually made him into what we see him as today, as a very jolly, loving, happy, well-fed individual, you know. So there's a lot of history behind Christianity. There's a lot of history behind Christmas, and and I think it's just a time to embrace everybody this time of year, especially those who are having tough times during this fake pandemic, and all those people that are they are losing their businesses. And that, by the way, we'll get into that because that has to do with
Yes.
that has to do with the Agenda 21 of taking away private property, and we'll get into that another time. But
Yes. And we have to get into that in terms of COVID-19 being the opportunity for the Great Reset under Davos. We need to revisit Davos as the Great Reset, Ron.
yeah, a lot of people don't understand it. It's
It,
this is serious times. This is extremely serious times, and the mere fact that people don't understand what's going on, that's the biggest shame. They don't feel that they could do anything. But in fact, if I can learn all this, and if I know all this, they can learn it too.
I know a business owner here in Rochester who doesn't understand why he was driven out of business. He lost his lease to the city of Rochester. He still doesn't fully understand why this is happening to him. And when I shared Davos, the Great Reset, in their own words, it's not something we're talking about. You can find the Davos officials, the Grand Poobah of Ethiopia, speaking about the need to reset the world economy. Um, our value, our money, our land, our resources, our goodwill, it's all being seized right now to level the playing field, so to speak, because they don't want American exceptionalism to continue into the future. President Trump represented a flagrant violation of this need to bring America down, to destroy our economy, to level the playing field, to turn us into a third world nation. And President Trump was the ultimate. Uh, he was the person who stood against all that. But I'm going on. Let's remember where we left off because we have to pick up next time with Davos, the Great Reset, and we'll take it from there because isn't that what we need to go? What do you think, Ron? Is that where we need to go
I
next?
totally agree. Davos Davos is the subject, but people ought to understand what Davos comes from. It comes from the Agenda 21 of 1993. You need to understand the groundwork of where it comes from, because if you don't understand where it comes from, then you're kind of lost in the weeds. And I just want to leave it this last note. This is it. They're hearing the word democracy, and you're hearing that over and over on media. We lost our democracy. We need to uphold our democracy. And I want everybody out there to understand that the democracy is nowhere written in the Constitution, and it is nowhere written in the Declaration of Independence. Democracy does not reside in the Constitution. It is not part of our language. Democracy, if you break it down, demo means people and kratos means power. Power of the people. Democracy. And so if you say, well, why democracy? Because it's an autonomous government. It's self-ruling by their own people, and everyone should be ruled by themselves. So it's really that's why you're seeing this out of control people out in the streets right now because they want these autonomous governments now. That's what democracy means: mob rules or
Wow.
the majority of the people. But that's not what we're about. We're a constitutional republic. And when you hear that word democracy, stop the person and say, why are you using that word? We're not a democracy. We
Right.
are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, which means everybody, all the states, this is a republic, and we
Mm.
must uphold the rule of law. And it is based off the Constitution. So we can get more into that. I want to thank you again for having me. Hopefully, we
Thank
didn't
you.
stretch it out too long. Merry
No,
Christmas.
back at you. Merry Christmas, Ron Branstner. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't wait to bring him back to Rochester. He's been here many times. Crowded rooms, crowded venues, social distancing. We're all alone and yet together. Thank goodness for the technology because Ron Branstner, he's coming back. He'll be in Rochester next year. We'll have you back here, Ron, one way or the other.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Ron.
And Merry Christmas to you and everybody else. Good night.
Good night.